to the other side of the screen as we enter the players round, where we discuss things that affect the players of a D&D game rather than the DM. Today's topic, I thought we'd go into character concepts and where they come from. Obviously, when we start a game or when we start as players, you know, you kind of design your character and build, but it's the personality that you really create. So I want to discuss, you know, firstly, how do we come up with our own sort of ideas, and then advise on how you can come up with your own concepts. Let's start with you, Anton. Like, when you design a character, what inspires you? How do you go about designing characters in your mind?
So I've actually had to think about this because it's kind of just a medley and then you end up with a character. But actually not. I tend to actually start off with a voice.
Okay.
So yeah, or I've got two things going side by side. I've got a voice and I've got some builds. So I always have 3-4 builds kind of lined up of things. I'm like, okay, this could be interesting. This could work. I like that. And then I've got a portfolio of around like 7-8 voices I know I can do. Right, so that gives kind of an image, and then I try and match those builds with those voices, and that kind of gives me an idea of what kind of character I want to build, right? And then the third step for me would be to come up with a concept, or maybe like the background of the character, like are they a spy, a noble, or a robot? And then I have to match the voice, the build, and the concept into something that's workable. The last bit for me would probably be figuring out the race of a character, because I can always decide. It's probably the least important factor, I think. I don't know if you agree with me on that when making a character, because between a human, a variant human, a half orc, and dwarf, you basically just got some stat modifiers going plus plus, and just make sure you have a plus in whatever stat you have, and you're good to go.
Well, no, I mean, for me, I think race can be important. If you have a particular concept in mind, sometimes race can come into play. I know my monk only worked as human because the organization he used to work for was inherently racist. So being any other race wouldn't have worked for the Hell Knights of Magdamar.
But you already had an idea of the type of campaign, obviously.
Yeah, the campaign was set, but the character concept wasn't set. It's only after I knew that I was playing a Pathfinder campaign and we were playing a Magdamar did the idea for where the character came from, and obviously at that point that kind of pigeonholed me into human, but I was happy with that choice.
So there, the campaign actually dictated your character,
for that one.
Dan, how do you go about it?
So I was just thinking about it. I just realized whenever I kind of conceptualize a character, like I'll get my inspiration from wherever. My initial concepts of a character are inherently visual, like they'll be in my head. And because of that, the race is kind of intrinsically tied into that look, to the point where like I would struggle to separate the two.
Really? Okay, so you go with visual first. You're like, this is the aesthetic I want.
Yeah, so back during the Custra campaign I played in, Vassell, who was a Purple Dragon Knight of Cormyr, she was always going to be a half-elf. There was a point where I was like, oh, if I go human, I'll get extra bits and bobs. And then I went, no. She has to be a half-elf.
Where does that come from? Is it just a space in your brain that decides, yep, half-elf, that's it?
I've got a bank of characters waiting, in sort of like conceptual stage.
I think my bank's opposite the street of your one.
Right.
Oh, so you have a bank of characters lined up, ready to go out.
Yes.
I do as well, though. I do have like...
really?
Yeah, I was accused of holicism recently because after playing a bard, I was like, okay, I kind of want to switch into a bard. He was like, how about you put holicism aside for a bit and just keep playing the monk for now?
See, this is interesting because I don't have any characters prepared other than the characters I've previously played. What I have are builds and voices. That's it. And then I constantly juggle those around and mix and match. And then whenever there's a campaign lined up, I'm like, okay, I've got this stuff ready. Yeah. What do I want to make of it? So it's very interesting. So there's like different approaches to character building. And Dan and Carl, you guys kind of coming from the same place, right, or not?
Well, for me as well, if I'm designing a character, mine always starts with a scene. I always picture a scene that I would like to achieve at some point with the basic concept that I have. For Catcher, it was always the first scene I ever pictured was the burning down of the tavern, and everything came from
right.
Yeah, literally,
you had to do this. Is like the mission.
First thought I had with Catcher, like when I was designing her as a character, it was a bit different in my head, but usually they are. But the idea was she would burst into this tavern, they suddenly recognize her, she'd send Drool jumping over, they'd attack the person, then she'd go around, burning down this place that had wronged her. So So for me, it always starts with like a scene. Either it happens as a dream or you daydream, because I daydream a lot. That's when it will develop from. It will develop from this one scene that I want to achieve, and then it goes from there. So for me, I
Oh
imagine like a
wow,
movie still.
that's really cool. Actually, I don't think about like that at all. So that's really like I
Mhm.
guess a nice
Mm.
cool factor to know.
In my head, I kind of I call them hero shots.
Mm.
We've spoken about it a couple of times, but the Witch Beyond the Wildlight campaign that I'm going to be joining in, like, I've got a catalogue ready and waiting, but each of those characters, like the satyr druid of the stars that I've got in mind, like the image I hold in my head is similar to Carl, just significantly less violent. This satyr is sat on a rock, looking like under the night sky, illuminated by the stars, playing a melancholic tune on his panpipes. Alder Tea Leaf, the halfling knight, his whole thing is rushing in front of a group of civilians and drawing out the teeny tiny little sword that he's scraped coppers and silvers together to buy, in his kind of rusted helmet. And yeah, it's just those kind of movie shots that I hold,
Mm.
and then I end up developing. So I'll keep those almost just images, and then I'll build the characters, like the personality around that. Because I DM so often, a lot, I've got a lot of these characters in the wings. So if I get a chance to play, then I just kind of go through my catalog and go, oh, this character works well with the setting for these
Oh yeah,
reasons.
yeah. I mean, if I were to go through my own process for Magnus, it was literally like voice. It's like, all right, posh English sounding voice with a bit of an officer-ish tone. Class, was interested in playing an Arcana wizard and add a bit of cleric just because that works. Concept, soldier, race, human. I'm like, done. That like lined up, and that was it. That's how it kind of, it's like almost like a slot machine. You get 3 sevens and yeah, but it's always very specific the way I go about it. But it is, yeah.
I think from a lot of people I know who've designed characters, I think a lot of them go with the hero shot moment. I think that's the as you put it, they'll always see something that they want their character to achieve, and that dictates a lot of it. Do you want to have that big hero moment? Do you want to have that big villainous moment? You and me, Dan, I know we've spoken about this in the past. It also played with music once. I think we both talked about particular songs that inspired D&D moments, and it was a similar sort of thing, that something had created this image or this scene in the head, be it the music or the actual imagery, and it dictated the design of a character.
Mhm.
And I think that's worked a couple of times just in that way. And I think that's actually how a lot of people's minds work when designing their characters. Apart from you, Anton, obviously you seem to be more analytic
Uh,
in the way you design.
yeah, I feel like I've been building characters wrong. Maybe I should be doing it, get that hero shot in mind, but like I wouldn't know what I would look like for my characters.
As I said, for
Yeah.
Catcher, it was a dream. It was a dream I had. It was a very sort of vivid dream, and then it I don't want to use the term festered, but that's kind of how I'd describe it. Is that image appeared? I woke up in the morning, and that image then grew and grew and grew. And then I remember coming to Dan, going, "Well, actually, I think I had this concept for another campaign." And then when Dan came along and said, "Hey, we want to do this," I was like, "Oh no, I've been thinking about this for a while. This image has been coming back to me again and again and again. I have this idea of a girl who wants to get revenge on people who have wronged her, and the big scene I have was her standing in front of the tavern in a Rorschach moment, is the way I described it. In Watchmen, Rorschach standing in front of the burning building, and that's the moment he changed and became the Rorschach. In Watchmen, I described Dan that Katja has to have that Rorschach moment, that she's washing away her past in fire.
So when you two have these kind of ideas, you have those kind of first conceptions. How do you kind of apply your ideas to create like a finished character? Because obviously, Carl, you're starting with the feel and the feel and the vibe of the character. Anton, in inverted commas, starting with the mechanics and the build, for example. But like, how do you then integrate the rest of the package? Like, Carl, how do you do it?
Once I have that image and that feel, I think next always comes the voice. Apart from Catcher, Catcher's voice is very just me trying to go up a few octaves and failing. But I've had other characters in the past, and once I know what they look like, I'll try to achieve a voice. Like usually if they're large characters, which they usually are, I try to start thinking about how they speak or what sort of physical impairments they may have that affects their voice or their thing. So I think I had one character in a Star Wars game. He was damaged from force lightning, so everything started moving towards the side of my mouth, and over time he started to develop, and then it became a very sort of roaring guttural sound because everything was very difficult to do. And at that point I started getting an idea, and this sounds really, really nerdy, but Tilda will attest to this. I sometimes walk around the house mumbling to myself because
Oh, don't worry, it's
yeah,
not. Yeah,
I'm
we're
just
there.
I
yeah.
become the character, and a lot of times, especially if I'm DMing, I will play a scene out in my head and I act it out,
No,
and
that's,
I
I'm
do the
there with
same.
you.
I do the same for my characters. I try to figure out who they are by having a conversation as them. Like Eric Cast, my monk, firstly was trying to adapt the British accent because obviously he was. This is who he really was, the knight who was trying to hide. And then I had to think, well, he's a knight and he's hiding. So suddenly it comes down, with the British accent, it starts becoming more sort of like, Cockney slang and everything. And he was a bit more, he's a bit more of a lad, like, way, until he got found out. But the point was, it's like, I tried to then figure out as those moments, how would he slip and things. So when he became surprised, it'd be like, yeah, this thing, oh, bloody hell. Oh, bloody hell. I tried to figure out these vocal tics and things.
Yep.
And that's always the second stage for me. Once I know what the hero moment is, once I know the feel of the character, why they're in this hero moment, I then like to know how they sound, because I can then push myself further, because then I can become that person. And yeah, I act it out to myself.
I definitely find the voice to be a very useful guide, especially in figuring out the concept or the background of the character, because the posh English officer voice fits perfectly with a soldier, right? Or like the tiny voice I do for Balthazar,
I
when he
love
speaks a
that
bit like
voice.
this. You imagine a halfling. I subverted that kind of by making it a warforged, but that's, you can figure out the other pieces with the voice. I find much easier than the rest, and so that's where I usually start with the voice, and then my build, my background, the race kind of block into it. So the four pieces come together for the final character.
How about you, Dan? What's your second stage?
Well, once I've kind of got a character pictured in my head, the next step is looking at kind of unusual pairings or combinations of mechanics, or just mechanics that I find kind of inherently interesting, but not from if I do this and I get this exact bonus. Nothing that micro, just on a macro level. So Star Druid I find very, very interesting, just as a meta concept. Previous character I played in a Dragon Heist campaign was Azorius Lovecraft. His class, quote unquote, is cartographer extraordinaire.
And he's a gnome.
And he's a gnome, and like that ended up translating to swashbuckler rogue and bladesinger wizard. And it was just like that pairing. Oh, can I be a rogue? Can I cast spells, but a bit more than arcane trickster? Oh, what are the combination? Oh, but Blade Song works really well with this, and then I can have the bounce and the jolliness of Azorius, and then the concept just kind of grew from there. Oddly, considering I'm a TM, the voice for me is actually one of the things that comes up last.
Really? Okay, but here's the thing. How many voices do you have in your repertoire? Because I've got like 7 or 8 good ones, right? How many do you have, do you reckon?
What I try to do is work on the idea that actually, at any given point, I could have thousands of voices just by changing things like speed, breathiness, like resonance, punch. Just by I almost picture them all as sliders, and then I think this is it. I mean, because a lot of the characters that I'm voicing aren't going to be around for a whole campaign, like a PC is. It always seems to be the thing I think up last. But I mean, once I do a voice for it long enough, I can just kind of fall into it. So whether it's Azorius Lovecraft the gnome, or Etelina the Vistani bard, or
I mean, when you say about repertoire, I think I don't have as much. I have English or shouty man as come across quite a bit. Like Groot was a very shouty character.
No, but you've got Troubadour Katya as well.
Troubadour Catcher. Well, that's a new one, but again, that's me just trying to go up a few octaves and not doing it very well. I think the one character whose voice people hate every time is First Officer Nicholas Ebenezer Grossworth, where I just channel my deepest Brian Blessed and just have at it.
All right.
I'm not going to
That's
do
quite-
it because
that's
I'd
quite
have to
difficult,
be
yeah.
over there somewhere and you'd still be able to hear it on the microphone because it is very loud.
So actually, you bringing up like Brian Blessed, right? Because I know that the Ebenezer voice is just a straight up imitation of Brian Blessed.
all the way, all the way.
So I suppose you could say like that you've got concepts and
Mhm.
then you've just got outright copying things, right? So what's like is it like do either of you two think there's like a difference? Like is there a marriage or a union between them, or like is it a little bit of both, or more so like what how do you where do you land on it?
Sorry, what's the old saying?
Imitation.
It's imitation is the best
Yeah.
form of flattery.
Right.
I mean, the Brian Blessed is saved solely for First Officer Nicholas Ebenezer Grossworth. Solely, like that voice doesn't go anywhere else. But yeah, it's that character is a large man with a big bushy beard who is very larger than life and will probably scream in your face that he is alive. I think when it comes to concepts, let's face it, everyone has that one character which is probably from somewhere. I know plenty of people who have made those drow characters with two swords because they've been heavily inspired by Dritz, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because he's an interesting character and people want to play interesting characters. I imagine after Game of Thrones, a lot of people were playing that sort of fighters and paladins because they really wanted to play like the Starks or Barristan Selmy, because who wouldn't want to be Barristan Selmy? Even without his armor, he was a boss. And I know characters who'd be like, well, if I maybe take fighter and I had a bit of, I could be my own Barristan Selmy and I could be like the so imitation in the character concept, as long as it's not too obvious, I have no problem with it. I have no problem shamelessly ripping off a particular thing I've seen on TV, as long as I add my own flair to it. If I've just watched Star Wars and I'm playing an Edge of the Empire character and I'm playing San Holo, kick me out that game because I've not been original. I mean, Dash Rendar's an exact example of that. Dash Rendar was just like, we want a Han Solo, but he's not Han Solo. So, they changed him enough to be an interesting character.
So whenever I look into a build, and I've mentioned this before, I always look at the duality that I can bring to that character. So, I'll look at the class and I'll go, okay, I'm going to put a background that just does not work with that at all. So I'll go rogue and I'll go noble,
Yeah.
or something like that. Just because and I could do that with race. I could be like, here you go, half orc, noble. And I've done that. Done that exactly.
My monk has knightly regard. He's his background's knight.
I mean,
yeah, well, exactly, and that's where you come up with the great characters when you have that duality, I guess.
I mean, Anton, I guess one of the first character that you saw me ever play was a barbarian with the scholar background.
Yeah.
The librarian.
Algrim, yeah.
Algrim.
Amazing character, yeah.
It's interesting because in the concept of like D&D, right? Algrim to me seemed a bit of a weird one because he was an intelligent barbarian, like he is a scholar. He was also two-handed, like two dual wielding, because I thought that'd be different from the norm. Can I make this work? The whole thing about him was that he was the scholar for his hold. There was a drow attack. His wife and child were killed in the attack. The relics that he was charged with protecting were stolen, and so he's off out into the world to track down these relics because he's dishonored his clan. He can't return until he's kind of struck off this debt oath. And he's going around. He's got tattoos, all the things that he needs to find across his body, and he's naked from the waist up. And like that whole concept, actually, I ripped off of Games Workshop's Dwarf Slayers, because they are dwarves that have dishonored their clan and then they go off into battle to die, right? Like usually with two axes, one in each hand. And like Algrim was just a rip-off of that concept, just without the death in battle.
Yeah, we're just trying to subvert the theme, I guess.
Yeah, but Algrim in no way, shape, or form felt like a Warhammer Slayer.
And it's actually like a great way of coming up with the new characters is going kind of against the trope. It's like you got your knight in shining armor, but they're background or their origin story makes them completely different to any other knight in shining armor you might have seen.
Yeah.
That's always a good fun for inspiration, I guess.
Put it into sort of perspective to make a good character concept. Have that hero moment in your mind. I think for everyone that's helpful. Have an idea of what you'd like your character to achieve in that hero moment. Then try to figure out who they are from that hero moment. Who is the person that you're seeing in your mind's eye? Depending on who you are, so then maybe work on the class and everything, or work on the voice. And as we kind of said earlier, borrowing concepts isn't bad within reason. Cliches are cliches for a reason.
But try to subvert it. That's
Try
where
to
the real
subvert
stuff
it,
comes
yeah.
from.
It doesn't
where the
take
real
much
stuff
to
comes from.
change it on its head.
Exactly. And as we've discussed in previous episodes, how you design your compelling character with the flaws mixed with these other things, and you're well on your way to having a truly magnificent character on the table. Maybe even one that you've borrowed from a particular podcast in a segment called BYOB. That would
Check out BYOB if you're looking for inspiration.
Exactly. Well, I think that sort of wraps up the players table for now. Any other sort of final thoughts, guys?
If you've got a character concept that you really like, that you really want to bring to life, just do what you can to bring it to life. Like, it may need some tweaks, it may need some adjustments, but like you're the architect, you're going to be the one that plays that character. So yeah, go nuts.
Right. Let's head towards happy hour. Thanks for watching. Release segments like this from the Tavern Between Dimensions every Friday here on the Explorers of Elsewhere channel. Otherwise, if you want to listen to the episode in full, you can check us out on Spotify and Amazon Music.